Over the past week, I've been getting a lot of questions regarding the new balance changes. For those of you that don't already know, Hypixel brought out some huge balances to the previously OP items. However, the one that we'll be covering in today's video is the Tarantula Helmet. This armor piece was most commonly used to deal damage paired with 3/4 of another armor set, but its piece bonus was recently nerfed for various reasons. Today, we'll be comparing the rebalanced Tarantula Helmet to a range of other armor pieces to see if it still holds viability or if you should replace it. So, with all that being said, let's get straight into testing. Alrighty, so as you can see in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Tarantula Helmet, and as a lot of you guys will already know, I always use my Tarantula Helmet. I've been wearing this piece of armor for a very long time now, and it finally got some new updates to it. There was a couple of changes that was made to the way that the piece bonus actually functions, and in today's video we're going to be discussing exactly what they did, whether it's still useful, where it's not useful, and things that you should be doing in regards to the new balances. So what exactly did they do to the Tarantula Helmet? Well, let's have a look at the piece bonus really quickly here, and if I read out the stats of the piece bonus, it says extra bonus radioactive. You gain +1 crit damage per 10 strength, and this caps at 1000 strength. So the actual change they made to the Tarantula Helmet is that last part where it caps at 1000 strength. Originally, you were able to just gain a ton of crit damage with infinite amounts of strength, and obviously if you do play dungeons a lot and you are a pretty decently high leveled player inside of dungeons, you will know that a lot of classes can gain well over 1000 strength and up to even 5000, 6000, even 7000 depending on the runs that you were getting. This of course is a very powerful ability, and a lot of people were using this helmet, including myself, as it was the most efficient for taking out anything inside of dungeons. However, it has finally gotten the well-deserved nerf that it did need, as this was really the only good option, especially because it was dungeonizable as well. So now that you guys are kept up to date with what they have done to the Tarantula Helmet, I'm not going to talk about this any further. I do have a video on the entire Tarantula armor set. If you would like to check that out, I will leave a link down in the description below. But in today's video, we're going to be covering a damage test with the Tarantula Helmet. I will also be doing a damage test with these 3 helmets here as well. I'll be using a regular Necron's helmet, a Bonzo mask, and also the golden Necron head in floor 7, of course. And I'll do both an out of dungeons test and an inside of dungeons damage test, so you guys get the most accurate results for these armor sets here, and I'll share my thoughts and give some extra information at the very end of the video if you guys are curious to hear about that as well. Alrighty, so making our way over to the crypts now, I'm only going to be testing the Tarantula Helmet and the Necron's helmet outside of dungeons, as the Bonzo mask and the golden Necron head will not be doing anywhere near the amount of damage that the Tarantula Helmet and the Necron's helmet would actually do. And this should be pretty self-explanatory. The Bonzo mask and the Necron's head are both really only used in dungeons, and if you are using these helmets outside of dungeons, I would advise that you get something different because they really aren't that great. Now, I'm also going to go over all the gear that I'll be using, my talismans, skills, and everything that you need to know. So for the armor pieces, I have recombobulated all 3/4 of my Necron set. I've put ancient on it. I've also hot potatoed and fuming them and maxed them out as much as possible. For the melee tests, I will be using this Scylla right here. I have got Sharp 7, Giant Killer 7 on it, and also some other maxed out enchants. It's got Withered, it's got fuming hot potato books, and it's also a 5-starred weapon. And then for the boomerangs that I'll be using inside of dungeons for the range damage test, these are the enchants that I've got on them. I have 3 recombobulated ones and then a non-recombobulated one. I'm only going to be using the recombed ones, however, and these are the enchants as you can see. As for talismans, I have 9 mythic, 8 legendary, 2 epic, 21 rare, 10 uncommon, and 12 common talismans, and all of the talismans, excluding the legendary and mythic ones, are all shaded, but the mythic and also the legendary ones are all on strong. I'm also combat 49, foraging 31, and also catacombs 31 as well. And then for every single one of these tests, I will not be using any pets whatsoever to give you guys some more raw damage numbers, and that way we don't have any pet items and other things that do come into account. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and test the Tarantula Helmet first up here with the melee test outside of dungeons. And after we gather all the numbers from these hits, I'll go ahead and compare the Necron's helmet as well. 331,000 damage. 331,000 damage. 331,000 damage. 331,000 damage. 331,000 damage. Now, if I go ahead and swap out both of these helmets and put on the full Necron set now to test this helmet out, we're going to go ahead and get a hit on the critical. We did 326,000 damage on both of those hits there, another 326,000 on those two hits, and just for good measure, if we hit this critical, we do 326,000 damage as well. So as you can see there, the damage difference between the Tarantula Helmet and the Necron's Helmet with my stats was very minimal. The Necron's Helmet still proves to be a little bit weaker than the Tarantula Helmet. However, this is out of dungeons. We do not really have a ridiculous amount of strength, and we didn't have blessings or anything crazy of the sort. So let's hop into the dungeon runs now, get some damage tests with all of the dungeon gear as well, and we'll see how this helmet compares with the Necron's Helmet and the other ones as well. Okay, so coming up in the first dungeon run now, I'm going to be testing all 4 of these helmets that I've got in my inventory. But first up here, we're going to be testing the Tarantula Helmet as always. Then we'll move on to the Necron's Helmet, the Bonzo Mask, and then finally the Golden Necron Head. So coming up on a group of mobs here, I'm going to throw a bone, and we're doing about 5.4 million to 8 point something million. So we did 8.6 million right there. We did 9.3 million to that Skeletor Prime. About 231,000 to the Super Tank Zombies. With about a rough average of around 5.4 to 11 million and mainly around 9 million damage per hit with the Tarantula Helmet. So to keep things simple, I'm going to say the Tarantula Helmet had a range of about 9 to 10 million damage per hit. It does fluctuate depending on whether it's a backswing or whether or not the mobs have more defense than one another, but for the vast majority of most of the mobs in the dungeon, the Tar Helm did around 9 to 10 million damage. But moving on to the Necron's Helmet now, if I go ahead, throw some bones out here, we'll do around 6 million damage a hit, 382,000 on the Tank Zombie, which was more than the Tarantula Helmet, doing about 8.9 million, so it is just a little bit weaker than the Tarantula Helmet. We do have a Shadow Assassin right here, so I'll go ahead, ice spray it, get some shots on it, and it does do around 800,000 to 1.8 million. That's not a very accurate test though, as it was a mini-boss. But as a general rule of thumb, we did around 6.4 million on those mobs too, but it looks like once again around 9 to 10 million damage per hit on most of these mobs. So moving on to the Bonzo's Mask now, if I go ahead and get some shots on some of these mobs here, on the Skelly Mask we did about 8.9 million damage. If we try and hit that sniper from a distance, we do about 9.1 million. If we aggro the Fell, we do about 7.8 million damage. And just to get some more damage numbers here, we're doing 300,000 damage to those Tank Zombies. So currently the Tarantula Helmet is still slightly better than the Necron's Helmet, although granted I do not have any blessings right now in the dungeon. The Tar Helmet and the Necron's Helmet are very, very close together in damage right now, although the Tarantula Helmet is leaning more towards the 10 million damage, while the Necron's Helmet is a little bit on the lower end towards the 9 million damage. But now that we have the Golden Necron's Head put on, let's go ahead, get some damage numbers on these mobs here, doing about 9.4 million I saw right there. If we hit this Zombie Knights right here, we did 9.6 million damage. Getting some shots on these mobs, doing 9.6, 9.3 pretty consistently, and about 6.7 for some reason on that Crypt Dreadlord. And then to get some final shots on there, all around the 5 to 9 million range of damages as well. So now that we have completed all of the dungeons testing, it is really difficult to try to get very accurate numbers on all the mobs, especially because all of them try to swarm you the moment you try to hit them. However, I was able to conclude that with no blessings at the very beginning of a dungeon run, the Tarantula Helmet still pretty much reigns supreme. The Golden Necron Head, however, did a pretty substantial amount of damage as well. I did see it peak at around 10 point something million damage, around 10.4, which the Tarantula Helmet never actually reached. And the Necron's Helmet is also a very great option as well, with it doing around 500,000 less damage at some points than the Tarantula Helmet did. The Bonzo Mask, however, is obviously the weaker option and is one that you shouldn't be using as a main helmet. It works really great in the boss fight to keep you alive and still maintain some really high damage numbers. However, it was substantially weaker than most of the helmets I tested, and ultimately I wouldn't really go for it for the main part of the run. So now this leaves the question of whether or not the Tarantula Helmet is still worth buying, or should you go with a different option instead? Now, before we move any further on with the video, I just want to remind you guys that this armor piece has been capped and is definitely not as strong as it used to be. And because I didn't test any dungeons with all maxed out blessings, as that would be very difficult and also incredibly time consuming, we can't really see how the Tarantula Helmet would fare at the very end of the run, and that could drastically impact the differences that the helmet has over the other heads we tested. However, the Necron's helmet will still stay below the Tarantula Helmet because the Necron's helmet doesn't have anything that really buffs it towards the end of a run. But the Golden Necron's head is definitely a different story. The thing with the Golden Necron head is that this item boosts your stats by 2 times depending on the floor that you're playing. Now, because I was playing floor 7, I would be testing the Golden Necron's head, as that's the one that buffs all the floor 7 stats. But because this helmet, as far as I'm aware, does boost all of your stats including blessings, the Golden Necron's head might actually be a lot stronger than the Tarantula Helmet depending on what part of the run you're in. Like I said before, the Tarantula Helmet at the very start of the run was definitely overpowering all of the other helmets that we tested today, but because we weren't able to test the dungeon run with really high strength blessings, the Necron's head might actually be stronger in some situations, when of course you have the opportunity to have all of the strength blessings that makes this one better than this one. However, the final part of the video, which really seals the deal of whether or not you should buy a Tarantula Helmet, a Golden Necron head, or whatever the helmet may be, we need to cover the costs, which is exactly why I've got the auction house pulled up here. If we have a look at the cheapest 5-star Tarantula Helmet that you can buy right now as we speak, we've got this one right here for 1.1 million coins. It's fully decked out, 5 stars. You can fix up the enchants if you really want to and put hot potato books on it. And we also have a lot of other ones. This one here has got the hot potato books on it with only growth 5, prop 5, going for 1.2 million coins. And this one is 1.4 million coins, also 5-starred. Now, the Golden Necron's head, on the other hand, is around 1.7 million to 1.8 million for the cheapest ones right here, which does prove to be 500,000 coins more expensive than the cheapest Tarantula Helmet that I could find on the auction house, which really lets us answer the final question here at the end of the video, which is the Tarantula Helmet still worth buying? Now, this whole video has been very surprising for me because I was expecting this helmet to be a lot worse with the recent changes. However, this helmet still proves to be a very viable option, and it does still do a lot of damage inside of dungeons. It's just that it won't be doing absurd amounts of damages towards the end of a run. Like I mentioned before, however, the Golden Necron head probably has a lot more capability at the end of a run, and if you obviously are able to get a diamond helmet, that's obviously going to be the best one no matter what. But ultimately, the Tarantula Helmet, especially with the current prices and everybody panic selling them, is still a great choice for you to get your hands on. I know that at least for myself, I'm still going to be using it to this day because it's still the better helmet outside of dungeons, and the Necron's helmet really isn't as great, and obviously these two are just not even comparable when playing outside of dungeons. And with all of that being said, that's going to hopefully wrap up everything that I had for today's video. If you did find this useful or informative in some way and it helped clear up some information regarding the new balances on the Tarantula Helmet, please do leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do make Hypixel Skyblock videos every Wednesdays and Fridays, and I will be making some more future videos on a lot of these balances to give you guys the most accurate information that I can possibly get to help you out with the decisions you make in this game. Now, if you have any further questions or you'd like to talk to me in a different environment to get some more information regarding this helmet, I do stream live over on Twitch every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's a really great place to be if you do want to ask any questions regarding the Tarantula Helmet, or maybe have questions about these helmets as well. And it's ultimately the best place to get the most accurate information from if that does interest you. But with all that being said, that's going to wrap up everything that I had for today's video. And as always, take care and peace. Why is this guy saying to marry him? Dude, that's kind of weird, bro. It's kind of weird. I'm already taken, man. I have like 5 girlfriends. I don't think they'd be happy with that. I just realized what I just said.